Okay, let's see what happens there. Okay, so okay. So we do have live captions. So I'm going to have to speak very clearly. Um, I was just talking to Mr. Lowe before, and he was talking about unpacking topics. And one of the topics he was discussing was the idea of trauma, basically hardship, the dark moments, and whether characters can completely overcome it. And we started, he asked me some questions, how I would unpack that. And we had a discussion about how we could unpack a topic. Let me get my phone because exact um, the exact discussion we had was on my phone. I'm just we're just chatting about a topic. Feel free to listen in or jump in if you want at all. So yeah, Mr. Lowe and I were just talking before. He messaged me and asked how I would look at unpacking this topic further. We looked at the topic. Where's the topic he gave me? Idea of years later, when you think you have recovered, it comes back to haunt you. Characters in the golden age are haunted by their past, discussed. And he was talking to me about how you might unpack that topic. We looked at what kind of questions you might ask for that topic. So things that we kind of thought we could break apart would be what causes. Are you eating, Lion?
Yeah.
I can hear you eating. Wait, I'm just going to put you on mute. There you go. So yeah, we were looking at things like what causes some characters to be able to overcome and not other characters. Why do some characters get haunted by their past more than other characters might? What type of things will cause it to come back? So are there events that characters can go through that they will overcome? Yet are there some that basically, does it depend on what the person experiences? Does it depend on who the person is? What kind of factors come into play with that? Can people ever fully recover from their past? Is it inevitable that trauma will stay with you? And then we talked more about how would you fully break up that topic. So the topic being characters in the golden age are haunted by their past. We had a few suggestions of how you could break this up. Whether you could do paragraph wise, so you could focus on grief and loss as one paragraph and look at Meyer and Penny, look at the trauma of Frank and Elsa and polio, whether you would look at the isolation of Ida. So there's quite a bit to work with there. My thoughts would be, when looking at a topic where it is about the trauma they have been through and how they overcome it, I think that because of the text, we have so many characters that have been through a form of trauma. We probably can't focus on all characters. We may be able to bring in small elements, parts where we've said, this character, for example, a character like Albert, for example, how it reinforced the fact that he could never adapt, and you could use that to back up Ida and why it took her so long to adapt. But ideally, those smaller characters would get used to back up the universal experience of major characters. So when I'm thinking about this topic, I'm going to think about which characters probably do we get their trauma shown to us the most. So who is haunted most by their past? It's really hard, probably not the best idea to avoid Frank. So with any topic you get, you really kind of, the text is Frank kind of, you get topics where he might work as a central person. You can argue that, but it is hard to ignore Frank. So if I was looking at this topic, I would say, firstly, I'm going Frank. And I'm looking at his traumas, and whether he can overcome them, why he can't. And then I'm going to do another paragraph on, I'd probably go with Meyer or Ida, probably Meyer, because I think we get more of an understanding with him of the traumas, his experience, and the way he responds to it. And then I would have a paragraph probably on Sister Olive Penny, and looking at what she's been through. Like I said, I might, in those paragraphs where the focus does appear to be Frank, Meyer, Sister Olive Penny, I might include a minor character just to back it up, to say, you know, as the universal experience. And so if I'm going to do that, for example, I'm going to look at Frank firstly, and I'm going to talk about his time in the attic. And something that I'm going to talk about with Frank and his time in the attic is about his age. You know, we know he was 4 to 5 years old when he was taken. His mum had to dress him up as a girl and take him over, and his name got changed, and he got made to hide in the attic, which we know was a really traumatic experience for him, because he got to a point where he would wet himself in there. He got to the point where he lost his voice. And so that's going to be a key part for me in looking at Frank's trauma. Obviously, I could continue to talk about polio and the impact that had on him. However, if I'm thinking about the whole text, it's really his experience during the war that was his key trauma. And I'm going to back that up. So just let me finish why I'm going to back that up. So just quickly saying he was young, if I'm going to use another character to back up maybe why he couldn't quite recover from that, I'm going to use age as an argument. And then I might bring in a character like Albert as more evidence to back up that argument that age is a determining factor on whether someone can move on or what leads them to be haunted for longer from trauma than others. Okay, so I'm just going to kind of make this a bit clearer. The argument I would be using would be Frank, in that where they're always kind of haunted by their trauma. And the basis I'm going to use as to why he's haunted is because of the age of what he experienced. Okay. In saying that, there are other characters who are older and don't quite move on from their trauma. And you might have a character where you say, but wait a sec, everyone, you know, some people can move on from trauma. And that's what you're going to talk about when you conclude this. Okay. So what you're going to do is you're going to get your paragraphs. First one, as I said, I'm going to focus on Frank. Second one, I'm going to focus on Meyer. Third one, I'm going to focus on Sister Olive Penny. And then in my conclusion, I'm going to have a bit of discussion. Okay. Why does it seem that some characters get more hindered by their experiences? Why the others kind of have some traumas where it seems they might be able to move on a bit easily than Frank does? I'm going to go off on tangents on this chat, so you're going to have to pause, go back, because even now as I say this, I'm thinking maybe the other characters are still quite traumatized. However, London gives us a lot more about Frank. We have more chapters where he's we know we're hearing his voice, so we're going to have more of an understanding of his struggle to resolve his past because we're getting more about him. So those who have me as a teacher who are watching this, you'll be used to my thoughts doing that. But those, if anyone's watching this and they're not in my class, sorry. So yeah, so that first chapter, as I said, first paragraph, I'm looking at Frank. I'm talking about his time in the attic, like I said, how he wet his pants, how he lost his voice. It said, you know, he didn't speak for a few days. It became a point of constant fear where Julia and Hedwiga wouldn't even put him in the attic the next time. They stopped the piano lessons. And then obviously I'm going to continue on in saying, you know, that how he's haunted by that still is when we see he's in the golden age, seeing the iron lung, feeling that sense of extreme fear and anxiety when he's in that position where he might feel trapped. Another point you could look at in terms of his trauma, it doesn't always have to be physical. You could be looking at from his time in the war, the attachment trauma or lack of attachment that happened with his mother, the break of that attachment, and the impact that continued to have on him. So we know the impact that had because he didn't feel connected to her anymore. He preferred it when his father visited in the golden age because he felt abandoned by his mum because she was the one he saw walking away. So I'm then going to talk about, for a long time he is haunted by his past. And even if he thinks he maybe have resolved that, we can go to the very end of the text where he's in New York and he still always needs to be looking out a window to not feel trapped. Okay, it stayed with him, that fear of being, that claustrophobic fear. It stays with him all the way up to New York, to always need to look outside. And then he names his first book Trains. Okay, we know the trains are what he looks at from the attic and what he can hear, and that's the thing that keeps him going. That's his netting factory, so to speak, because he sees it as constant movement. So I'm going to question, does Frank ever really move on from the trauma? Let me give you arguments to say that he doesn't. You might say he does. That's fine. I don't think he does, and these are my arguments why. One, as I said, he needs to always be able to see outside. Okay. Second, the fact that he names his first poetry book Trains. Although you could argue that it is his writing that provides him a voice that he lost in the attic. It is his poetry that then allows him to heal, and Trains, the book, is the reflection of that. Again, it's interpretation. But the third point I'm going to say is that he ends up, living alone when he's older. And to me, that signifies that attachment, that abandonment, the loss of attachment he had from Elsa when he realized that they were worlds apart, the abandonment, loss of attachment he had from his mother, and he ends up alone again. But then we could say, but he does, adopt a child. And does that then argue that that's a way that he heals? So the thing about a good English essay is you're going to be able to look at all these different ideas. It's not just going to be like, yes, Frank has trauma, this is what he goes through, this is how he moves on, this is how he doesn't move on. I've now verbally given you my train of thought, which has a lot of arguments that maybe he does, but maybe he doesn't. That's up to you to choose what you want. And you could do both. You could say in part he moves on, but in other areas he can't. Why in some, or is he trying to do the best he can to resolve what he went through? Then with that, you could, like I said, we could back the idea of him up at the age of what he went through and go, you know what, Albert seems like a really minor character. That poor dude in the wheelchair, just trying to get his way up the hill. Pause. But could you back that up, use that to confirm that the age of what you experience is a key factor? Because, those in my class know that we've talked about when you are 4, 5 years old and you go through this pain, you don't have the words, you don't know how to process it. And because of that, it does kind of remain somewhere in your brain. I don't know where, some spot. Those who are doing psych can tell me which spot it goes to. So then my second paragraph, I said I'd talk about Meyer. And again, remember Meyer's one that we said that there's all this trauma and it's just like written like, all of Meyer's family died but one sibling. He basically saw his dead brother stacked up like firewood. And it only gets one paragraph. It's like all of this happened and then cut off. And then there's the other part in the text where they talk about his sister being raped. And again, it's just like that one paragraph and cut off. But I find that a really clever literary device that in the way London has done that, because the way she brings it in and cuts it out is exactly what Meyer does. So she's writing that to demonstrate the way he manages it. It says, I do have the text on me, but I didn't want to be opening pages and things. How he basically like just turned his head or he closed his eyes and like just blocked it away. So, how does Meyer manage his trauma? He tries to shut it out. And as I said, it is hard with a character like Meyer because we from basically the point where Frank and Elsa, I guess what I'm saying is it doesn't really go back into his pain a lot. We more so get the means of how he does work to transcend. And that is through obviously his interest in Sister Ollie Penny and his connection with being outside, being able to accept the new country. But we never really know if Meyer is ever, if he's ever able to fully overcome or if he's just able to always shut it out. If any of you want to go through the book a bit finer than I am right now to look for any snippets or parts that prove that he maybe just hasn't been able to shut it out, please do it. Okay, but you don't want to walk past Jaden because you're going to be on my class's video. So, that's a question that I have is does he ever actually recover from that pain in the war of losing his family, or does he learn to really just block out what he's been through? And again, you can argue, sorry, Jaden, can you not? Like, this is going to all the year 12s. Can you argue that, sorry, I've just lost my train of thought now. That he never really does recover, because he blocks it out, or because of the age that he is, being a different age to Frank, does that provide him more tools to be able to process it? Again, I'd argue that he doesn't because of the way he just represses it. I would say suppress, because suppressing it, it's an intentional thing. Repressing is an unintentional thing. I believe Frank represses what he's gone through. He was 4 years old. I believe that Meyer suppresses it because he still has that, really kind of clear-cut memory. And then that other character I'd be looking at is Sister Ollie Penny, who we've talked about in class about her being liberated sexually. But I really want to go into why she is liberated sexually. Whether it is simply her trying to take ownership of her body and her freedom as a woman, or whether there's more to it. And I think there is more to it. Reason why I say this is Sister Ollie Penny, we know her first husband died, okay, from the war. We know she then started to fall for a soldier when she was working in the infirmary, and he died. And then we know she started to get feelings for an older man, and he also died. So that's 3 men. 3 men she's fallen for, and they have died. So this is going to be real hardship, and this is going to haunt her. The way I think she deals with this is 2 ways. Firstly, the no attachment. So by having casual sex with men and then going, there's no more to this. This is just casual sex. It stops her from building that emotional attachment to people, therefore protects her from being hurt again. It protects her from having someone leave and go through the same pain. I think she also uses her, obviously she still has that emotional element to her, and I think she's able to use that then in her work. As a nurse of the golden age. So she's able to, I guess, compartmentalize those 2 parts of her physically and emotionally. The physical part she's able to wholly put into her sex life. And the emotional part she's able to put into her work in the golden age. So, look, they're the 3 characters that if I was given this topic, I would focus on. And I don't usually say that or recommend to break up a topic character based. I don't really think there's a set rule because if I'm going to be looking at topic sentences, I'm still not going to be doing it based on character. I'm going to be thinking about the trauma they've been through, what they've gone through, why they've overcome, and then I'm going to start to really get some depth with that character. While, as I said, it is good to touch on other characters to show that universal experience, I worry that if you do that, if you try and put 2 or 3 characters in one paragraph, we don't actually get enough grit or depth of one character. And a really complex analysis will be able to really pull apart that one character and their psyche for a topic like this. My conclusion for this now, a lot of you with conclusions might just be, and this is what I said, and this was my point, but I want to come to a conclusion. All those questions I asked at the start are what I now want to answer in my conclusion. So let me just get those questions back up and tell me how I'm going to answer, and I'm going to say, how am I going to answer them in the conclusion? So things I'm going to be asking are, sorry, that's Link. You can probably hear Link meowing. Why do some characters get more haunted by the past than others? There I might talk about their age. Therefore, there I might talk about whether they find a means to express it. I might talk about whether they find a vocation. I might talk about, you know, we don't quite know if they're still haunted or not, because the way London has set the text out doesn't always give us enough of a character to be able to show that they've completely moved on or healed. What type of things will return? The level of trauma. I think, you know, with Frank, the trauma of the polio is something he is able to move on from a lot more than the experiences in the wartime, because I think that lack of attachment with his mum and that extreme fear he had is ultimately what built who he was. Can trauma always be overcome? You might say you learn to live with it. You learn to adapt. They learn to find ways to manage. You might want to bring in a 4th paragraph about a character that you do think overcomes their trauma and pain. I don't really think the text really gives us one. Even Elsa, she has to have that window always, the same thing. There's that real beautiful idea of thinking that they're always looking out at each other, just to add the romantic side to the text. But that would be the way a optimist would look at a text. And yeah, we know that that's probably not the way I'll look at the text. Other questions, just looking at Mr. Lowe's questions that he gave me at that point. What makes people think they've recovered? Do we ever really know if they think they've recovered? I don't know, again, if London gives us that exactly. I think that's what type of things return. Yeah, what helps people to recover? Is it even possible? We've talked about that. Things that can help people to recover, or rather survive and live with it and still thrive in their life, can be writing, a vocation, nature, connection with others. We would talk about that's different depending on the person. I think Frank needs to write because he lost his voice. He, you know, in the attic, and he lost the ability to use words to express his pain, and that's why the pen to paper, or sorry, prescription pad symbolism really helps him with that. So look, this was really just a quick podcast. I've only talked for 25 minutes because when I'm motivated to speak, I need to do it at the time. And I hope at least, you know, these are just my ideas. It doesn't mean they're the correct ones. It doesn't mean that there is a universal correct answer. It's your interpretation. And I probably jump onto this these kind of way of thinking more because I am interested in trauma. As you guys, I've told my class that it's something that's always been something I'm fascinated by, how the human mind heals. Can we ever fully heal from pain? Why do some people have the ability to be able to be more resilient than others? These are all these questions I'm always having. So I just really wanted to give you all these thoughts in just a little video, so to get you thinking more about it. Okay, so with lots of topics, you know, I might do some of these videos every now and then just to get you thinking more about it. And I'd love to hear your comments, what you think about the ideas I've talked about. If you think there's another character that I've neglected that really needs a whole lot of information here, like for example, Ida could be another paragraph. Okay, you might want to look at Elsa. You might want to look at Margaret. The thing about the Golden Age is there's so many characters, and unfortunately, in a SAC or an exam, you don't have the time to write a thesis. So the ability is to choose the most effective evidence and the most effective parts of the text to back up your point, rather than just kind of picking a character out of the air and going, that one will do. So yeah, like I said, any questions, anything you want to say to this? If there's any kind of topics that you've seen that you want me to do one of these videos about, just to give you my train of thought, I'm happy to do so. At least I feel like I'm being productive. I hope you're doing okay at home at the moment if everything's going on. Remember, no weddings with more than 5 people at the moment. So if you guys want to get married, probably need to do it in a school. But other than that, I hope you're all looking after yourself, and I will see you all soon. See you later.